Hi, what lurks beneath. I'm a resident at one of my local villages, and I wanted to talk about all the hard work that the rangers have done in the local countryside. I've met them a few times before, but only several years back, when we mainly had poachers and other unknown hunters in the area. Anyway, I'm writing this to tell you about some things that happened recently. As you know, the area is vast and spread out. I myself live in the town of Burt, and we are pretty rural down there. You can't even see the church piers from where I'm at. My backyard is pretty much the Alabama countryside, and God's green earth is as dry as a bone this summer. Look, you're gonna think I'm crazy for telling you this, but hey, I'm just a small town girl with a good head on my shoulders. I look after my mom, my dad, and I give my life to the Lord. I ain't a bad girl. I don't even watch television, and I don't want to corrupt my mind. So I was out in the stables, and I have a few ponies. My dad got them for me for my 18th birthday, and he always tells me if I spend as much time finding a husband as I do with my horses, then I'd be doing better. But I digress. Well, I was down by the stables, and my feet were resting on the hay. I decided to have a little rest on the bale. It was a hot day, and I forgot my water. Now, something I should note. I live about 20 minutes from the stables, which is a long way when you're thirsty. On this particular day, the sky was a dewy blue, and I looked up at it and thought, wow, what an awesome place to be. Just as I lay there, I felt something moving from under the bale. It kind of creeped me out. But then snakes are not that strange here in Alabama, and I jumped up as a precaution. But this was no snake. Something was moving under the bale, and bits of straw were falling around, creating a mess. What was even weirder was that Jeff, my horse, got a little spooked. He was jumping and making all sorts of crazy sounds. I ran over to him, as he was my priority. From under the bale, something was stirring. I was shaking and sweating a little with nerves. I looked around to see if there was anybody else nearby, but it was deserted as anything. I decided to be brave and kick the bale. I kicked it with all my might and closed my eyes a little, expecting something to jump out a bit and bite the hell out of me. But no. I opened my eyes and blinked several times. In shock, it was big. Really big. It was filled with a jelly-like substance. The only thing it looked remotely like was an octopus, but it had a weird humanoid face. It scared the hell out of me. I stepped well back as I thought I had encountered the devil himself. This thing, this creature, whatever you wanted to call it, was making a disturbing, drowning, gurgling noise. It also had tiny little feet, which appeared to have webbed toes that allowed it to stand, no more than 1 foot from the ground. I felt so sick that I was scared. The creature thing slid away, just like a jellyfish in the ocean. My eyes never left until it disappeared into the grass. When I got back, I told my dad and mom, and they thought I'd been smoking something out there in the barn. Now again, I'm a pretty good girl, and anybody around here can attest to that. I don't know what I saw, but this thing creeped me out. It was not human, and I have never seen an animal like this. It appeared to be very amphibious, some sort of water-like creature. The only thing I can do is look online, but I found that anything like what I looked at is a kind of cryptid, I guess they're called. Anyway, all I know is I sure as hell don't want to see it again. Look, I don't know if this thing crawled out of the nearby pond or was some sort of mutated, weird-looking frog, but I don't want to see it again. It scared me. It looks like it belongs in the bottom of a pond, and that's where it needs to stay. When I was a kid, my grandma used to keep me and my siblings over at summertime. So during the time, it was me, my 2 brothers, and my sister. I was the oldest that summer. In 1995, I would have been 10. Computers were just coming in, and so we played Nintendo a lot. just for my memory. Something happened that summer which has haunted me these past 25 years. I'm a grown man now, but still it bugs me that I saw something that summer, and I don't know what it was. Grandma would have been in her 50s at the time, and was still a pretty fit and agile woman. We lived in a big country house in North Carolina at the time, and we spent most of the summer down by the lakes, jumping into the pools of water and waving at Grandma, who was reading her books and novels on the deck. I remember me and my younger brother, Kaylee, who would have been around 8 at the time, were throwing a ball to each other. It was a pretty simple game of throwing back and forth. Nothing crazy exciting. Our grandma was taking pictures and looking super proud of us. I can still remember looking at my brother's super thin arms and thinking he ought to be wearing something in the lake. If anything happened to us under her watch, my mother would not be very happy. Mom was a businesswoman who spent a lot of her time in New York, and she didn't really favor our grandmother watching us, who was her mother-in-law, but she let it happen regardless. Well, it was a hot summer day like I said, and the lake was filled with children all around the neighborhood. It wasn't just us. There were teenage kids too, playing ball, and I guess being good-for-nothing juvenile delinquents to us smaller kids. I remember all of a sudden, the lake seemed to empty, as it was just me and Kaylee. I remember looking for my grandma, and she was still there but resting with her head back. I hope to God there wasn't some shark or something in the lake, and that's why everybody retreated. But I guess that thought was crazy, as again, it was just a lake. I was a kid after all, and probably a pretty dumb one too. I continued playing with my brother, and I felt something almost tugging at my foot. It was kind of like a scratching sensation, and it got pretty annoying. I was struggling not to go under after a minute, and only I had the ball to keep me afloat. It seemed like I was going to be dragged underwater. I started screaming and called to my brother for help, but he thought I was just goofing around. I started clapping the water and banging for attention, but no one ever looked. Finally, something dragged me underwater, and I could see under there. Whatever had a hold of me was long and white and was continuously pulling me under. It seemed to have weird amphibious-like ears and eyes that glowed a dull red under the water. This wasn't a person or any type of fish that I could see. I pulled to release my grip, and I finally did. It was a struggle back to the surface, and I swam back as fast as I could. My brother finally seemed to realize that something was wrong. I told my grandmother, and she told me just not to worry, that it was probably just my imagination. I don't know if anybody has had similar experiences in that lake, but every time I think about it, I get the spooks. I told my wife this story recently, and she's pretty sure I encountered some sort of being, whatever the heck that is. Could be an alien. I don't know. All I know is that I nearly died, and this thing was no person that was pulling me under the water. It was some sort of strange creature that I'd never seen before. The night back at grandmother's, we had hot tea. I was wrapped up in a towel, as I was still pretty clammy and sweaty after my incident, and shaking in fear. My siblings sat around me, as if I was some hero, and I retold the story over and over. Maybe I did add some details to embellish myself as a kid, but now, I see it for what it was. You can see the lake from my grandmother's house. It's like a deep white pool of black liquid at night, and sometimes the moon shines over it, and it looks quite breathtaking. I had the craziest idea to go back to the lake at night and see if I could see anything, but my brother, luckily, talked me out of it. That night, I had finished my hot tea. I pulled back the curtain and looked down at the lake. I could have swore I saw something popped up and was looking at me, but all I saw was a dark silhouette, a shadow. I continued staring, but what I spotted, or at least what I thought I spotted, seemed to sink back into the deep of the lake. Anyway, the next summer that I went back to her house for the summer, I stayed out of the lake because I remembered everything that happened last year. I sat with my grandmother and read books, and just told her I wasn't comfortable swimming. She thought that was odd. What was scary though, and this just disturbed me, it left me with a pit in my stomach. I spotted the face of a kid on a roster near the lake. I walk up to the poster and saw a little kid. He was 7 years old, and the sign read something like Corey Harrison, I think was his name, presumed missing. The date was 6 months previous, and I just looked back to the lake and thought to myself, what if? To this day, I don't know if I spotted some sort of creepy creature, or maybe just a giant salamander or what, but whatever it was had a firm grip on me and was pulling me down deeper towards the middle of the lake, and somehow, by the grace of God, I broke free. Hi, my name's Julie, and I have a story that dates all the way back to when I was going to high school with my close friend Leslie. This was nearly 30 years ago. Right now, I don't have time for BS because of the whole quarantine and just, well, I kind of have a semi-important job. I work as a lawyer at a law firm in Texas now, so I really don't have time to BS things. So keep in mind that this story did happen. We were both at my friend Leslie's house. At the time, I believe we were studying for our SATs, and we were both at my friend Leslie's house. In the basement, actually, if I can remember correctly. We saw something, though, outside. Something large, with emerald green eyes, if I remember, and it had weird, long ears that drug behind it. Its body was white, and it appeared to have several legs. It looked right through the basement window at both of us, and we both screamed and ran away, up the stairs, up into the kitchen. I remember how terrified we were. We both even cried. But then my friend Leslie began to get really upset at me, thinking that this was a prank that I was pulling on her. I tried to assure her it was no prank. She claimed to have saw through me, and was convinced I was lying to her, pranking her. But somehow, after some time, I convinced her that I wasn't lying, and that we both did see something odd. Whatever it was. It wasn't normal, and it wasn't a natural animal. This thing was spooky. I'm a little embarrassed even now to admit this, but I have a real interest in the supernatural, and things that are normally scary. I thought maybe you'd be interested in to hear my story. Although I wish I could tell you what it was we saw. All I can say was it wasn't natural. Was it a ghost? No. It was some sort of living creature. It was flesh and blood, whatever it was, but it had a very scary face. It was definitely something really weird. Anyway, not long after, my friend moved away, just a few weeks or even a few months after, and we never really got the chance to talk about it, nor did she ever really want to talk about it afterwards. I think it scared her far more than it scared me. Anyway, I think for me, it kind of sparked my resurgence into the paranormal, as even as a kid, I always found that stuff interesting, but kind of lost interest in it for a while, until that happened, which scared the daylights out of me. But then after that, I kind of got back into it, and even now thinking about it, it definitely was some sort of cryptid being. Anyway, I'm glad I can share my encounter with you.